Hi everyone! Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite bands, as you may be able to tell by the shirt. We're talking Foo Fighters. Now I've had the pleasure of listening to their discography for the past 2 weeks to come up with the cream of the crop. I'm calling this, undeniably, the top 10 best Foo Fighters songs. And just to stir things up a little bit, I'll have my pick for an overrated song at the end. But in the meantime, let's get to the top 10. At number 10, we have Big Me from the album titled Foo Fighters. While Nirvana was active, Dave Grohl sometimes would book studio time to record demos of his compositions. After Kurt Cobain's suicide, Dave was unsure how to move forward. He allegedly had offers to join Pearl Jam, and Tom Petty himself asked Grohl to be part of the Heartbreakers. Dave turned it all down to focus on his pet project. Grohl would enlist producer Garrett Jones to work on a set of songs he had been collecting over the years. Outside of one guitar solo, Dave would record every sound on the 12 songs that would end up on the album. The whole LP was recorded within 5 days. Each song took roughly 45 minutes to complete. With Grohl recalling, he would run from room to room, bouncing from instrument to instrument, starting at the drums and working efficiently. A few sips of coffee and then right back to it. He came up with the name Foo Fighters, as old World War II slang for UFOs, mainly to make it sound like it was a group that made the record, and not a one-man band. The release was super below the radar, with only 100 records and 100 cassettes pressed. Dave started giving them out to friends for feedback, and soon enough, they were circulated among the head honchos from the music industry, creating a big buzz to sign a record deal. The debut album is a loose, homespun effort, filled with spiky punk and casual melodies. It wasn't exactly Nevermind Part 2, but some songs were definitely Nirvana adjacent. On the rocking I'll Stick Around, the blunt riff could have come from In Utero, and Grohl howls like his tormented old friend. But within the track listing, he also shows a lighter touch and willingness to not always take things so seriously. Big Me is a rose-tinted love song with a gentle jangle written about Grohl's wife, while he was playing drums with Kurt and Chris. The slacker pop rhythm dances with a candy-coated melody that is unafraid to be vulnerable. It was a big crossover pop radio hit, in part helped by the award-winning music video, where the band goes through a series of silly vignettes like a campy Mentos commercial. The video's success led to some tools throwing Mentos at the band during gigs, which caused the band to stop playing the song live for a while altogether. Thankfully, they put it back in their live rotation years later. Pretty sure people don't really buy Mentos these days, so I think the fellas should be safe. Big Me is a dopey, big-hearted love letter that hinted at the surprising depths hidden inside the mind who manned the kits in Nirvana. At number 9, we have My Hero from The Color and the Shape. In order to tour, Dave Grohl needed to assemble a legit band. The Northwest godfathers of emo, Sunny Day Real Estate, were breaking up, so Dave enlisted the rhythm section, bassist Nate Mendel and drummer William Goldsmith. He also envisioned needing a second guitarist, so he recruited Pat Smear, formerly of the Germs, and briefly part of Nirvana near their tail end. Having all been in bands that had broken up, Grohl likened it to getting into a rebound band, to get over the loss of the old one. When it came time to record their sophomore album, Grohl wanted to work with Gil Norton, a producer he adored for wrangling great albums from the Pixies. Working with Norton was the first test for the young band. He spent days with Grohl in pre-production, working on stripping songs down to their essence, and what Dave called the larger picture in the song. Gil was demanding, and actively strived to make the band play better and redo takes until they were perfect. Nate Mendel would say it was a reminder that music was their career, and there was always room to improve. The session started in Seattle, and then moved to LA, where Dave re-recorded the drum parts, unsatisfied with Williams' takes. Eventually, word got back to William. Dave tried to convince him to stay and tour with Foo Fighters, but he felt betrayed. Goldsmith's drumming would only be heard on 2 songs on the LP. My Hero was one of Dave's earliest demos. Mendel would say once he heard it, he knew the band had a bright future. Nate's steady sliding bass, along with Grohl's huge heavy metal snare hits, paced the rhythm. During the verses, the guitars pick a stinging riff, before the chorus adds thundering power chords to make it bombastic, as Dave shouts of everyday people being exceptional. There goes my hero, he's ordinary. Written from the perspective of a child, increases the wide-eyed viewpoint, making the heroics larger than life. My Hero is a gripping ode to working-class champions that we rely on every day to make the world a better and kinder place. At number 8, we have Times Like These from One by One. Dave was a fan of Taylor Hawkins, Hawkins, the drummer who toured with Alanis Morissette. And needing someone new to man the skins, he asked Hawkins if he knew of any good players. Dave thought playing with Alanis was a bigger deal, but Taylor jumped at the opportunity to be in a band of brothers and would earn his rank as a co-pilot. Shortly after Taylor joined, Pat quit, exhausted from non-stop touring. Sometime later, needing to find a second guitarist, the band held weeks of auditions. Dave would hit it off with Chris Shiflett, formerly of No Use for a Name. Once they remembered they had run into each other playing underground punk gigs. Knowing Chris came from that type of passionate DIY background was enough to make Dave think he could be a Foo Fighter. The preliminary sessions for One by One were the hardest the band ever dealt with. It almost seemed like their heart was no longer in it. Tensions would often flare in the studio. They spent 3 months making the $1 million demos that they weren't proud of and that would never see the light of day. The album was shelved while Dave went on tour drumming with Queens of the Stone Age. Times Like These was written about these months, where in Grohl's mind, the band was disappearing, and he said he felt like he had lost a bit of himself. Guitars clank between sections, keeping the beat anxious. Grohl's voice soars as he sounds like a phoenix. I'm a streetlight shining. The chorus has open chords and a big, humble hook made for crowds, reminding us through all life's trials, it's times like these you learn to live again. Times Like These is a rousing, triumphant anthem about discovering what you're made of and the power of perseverance. At number 7, we have Walking After You from The Color and the Shape. For their second effort, Gil Norton also wanted Dave to step his lyric game up and write words more meaningful. Grohl was ready for the challenge to delve deeper and found that it was liberating to be able to communicate something he couldn't say in everyday conversation. During the time, he was in the midst of separation from his wife, which gave Grohl plenty of emotional ammunition to work with. He compared writing to introspective weekly therapy sessions, giving a voice to his inner struggles. Putting greater emphasis on words also emboldened Dave to overcome the insecurity he had about his singing voice. Therapeutic themes permeate the sequencing of The Color and the Shape, as it bounces between up-tempo rockers and sentimental ballads, wearing its emotions on its sleeve. Dave even considered putting a therapist couch on the album cover to drive the point home. Walking After You is a doleful love song about getting dumped and unable to break that love spell. On the album, it's bare bones, mainly focused on Dave singing with his dusty acoustic. The relationship may be over, but Grohl is still googly-eyed. I cannot be without you, matter of fact. Oh. I'm on your back. The lovely melody drips with melancholy over a swaying rhythm. Walking After You would be re-recorded in a slightly faster version for inclusion on the X-Files movie soundtrack, with shuffling, intricate drumming, and cooing backup vocals decorating the arrangement, with production by Jerry Harrison from Talking Heads. Personally, I prefer the intimate album version, but both versions show how rock solid the bones of the song are. Walking After You is a delicate, vulnerable plea to keep the flame alive, where the honeymoon turns to heartbreak. At number 6, we have Learn to Fly from There's Nothing Left to Lose. Between Pat Smear departing and Chris Shiflett permanently becoming the second guitarist, there was a brief spell where Franz Stahl was the added 6-string muscle. He was an old friend of Dave's. They had played together in a punk band called Scream, so there was no audition. Over time though, Franz didn't click with the other 3 when they started writing new material, and the group decided they should move on, recording their third album as a trio. Made in the semi-finished basement of a house Dave bought in his home state of Virginia, the sessions for There Is Nothing Left to Lose were laid back, with their friend Adam Kasper producing. Grohl would say it was so comfortable he did all of his vocals sitting on the couch. Typically the band would have songs written and rehearsed prior to sessions, but with no label pressure, the 3 young men hunkered down for 4 months, writing tunes in their work-in-progress studio. The album's title reflected their general devil-may-care demeanor. Learn to Fly doesn't waste a second, kicking right into a supersonic guitar riff, along with the sturdy rhythm section. On the verses, the guitar chords are cleaner and picked out, while Nate Mendel sustains deep whole notes over Taylor Hawkins' animated Ringo stomp. The chorus crashes in, with shimmering power chords as Grohl passionately sings about seeking a creative spark and allowing your mind to remain wide open. I'm looking for the sky to save me, looking for a sign of life, looking for something to help me burn out bright. Learn to Fly is an uplifting, melodic earworm about the skybound search for the inspiration that keeps you feeling alive. At number 5, we have Walk from Wasting Light. Following playing some of the biggest shows of their career at Wembley Stadium, Dave Grohl wanted to record the next album in his garage in Encino. He recruited Butch Vig, who produced Nevermind, and convinced him to not only helm the project from a makeshift studio with a control room tent in the backyard, but also to work on the project entirely on tape. By 2010, not using computers while tracking was like handicapping yourself, and it meant the band had to work twice as hard recording and embrace imperfection. Grohl put up baffles on the garage door, and the drum kit sat next to his spare fridge. The sessions were a fun family environment that included time for cookouts, swimming in the pool, and little tykes bothering their parents while they were trying to do their day jobs. Pat Smear rejoined Foo Fighters full-time, and old friend Chris Novoselic even showed up to add some accordion, furthering the family reunion vibes. The title, Wasting Light, was sincere. The group felt that they were in their prime and didn't want to let 1 second go without truly feeling it. Walk is a genuine epic ballad that starts off with one clean guitar picking out tremolo hold notes and the other guitar palm muting power chords. Subtle bass and soft kick drum is introduced on the first chorus, and after Grohl asks, "Where do I begin?" the band is fully fired up, kicking the momentum into full throttle. The song's optimism is infectious. Written partially about his daughter's first steps, the narrator feels he's free as a newborn and ready to make up for lost time. The bridge erupts as Dave shouts, "I never wanna die, I never wanna leave, I'll never say goodbye," like he's bull riding an atomic bomb. Walk proved that 15 years in, Foo Fighters still had plenty of powder left in the barrel. It's a dynamic, singular message to push through, stay strong, and keep on keeping on. At number 4, we have Best of You from In Your Honor. One by One proved to be their biggest album yet, and Dave Grohl wasn't quite sure how to follow it. Rushing back into the studio would be too straightforward. He toyed with the idea of scoring a film, and even considered a possible solo album, with all the acoustic numbers he had piled up. After realizing he had 5 hours of unfinished demos, he decided to bring the acoustic songs to the group. He figured after 10 years of Foo Fighters, they needed to break new ground. With so much material, Grohl decided to record a double album. One with rock and roll cranked to 11, and the other full of delicate acoustic numbers. He dubbed it The Bottle and the Hangover. The development and recording of In Your Honor stretched over 9 months, partially because Dave decided to build a new studio in SoCal. The construction stretched so long that the band would occasionally help with light carpentry to speed things up. Best of You almost didn't end up on the double LP. The band recorded a demo and thought that they could do better, so they moved on. It was only after listening to all that they had amassed that their manager John Silva said the song's absence was felt and persuaded the band to revisit it. Best of You is a towering rocker where you could feel the blood, sweat, and tears in its spirited howls. It starts off with only guitar and vocals until the full pounding rhythm appears at the second verse. The band has a flair for tension, making the most of stops and starts between the verses and choruses. The words reach out to those who have been hurt and inspire them to wear their pain as a badge of honor. Best of You is a passionate, working-class song of resistance that transcends language and turns commiseration into karaoke. At number 3, we have All My Life from One by One. There was so much hostility making their 4th album, it looked like the end of the line for Foo Fighters. Completely dissatisfied with how the first session's mixes sounded hollow, almost like another band was playing their songs, they went on a hiatus where Dave played with Queens of the Stone Age. Taylor Hawkins had recently come out of a coma after overdosing and felt betrayed, as if Dave was leaving him and the band in a desperate time. Their next booked gig was at Coachella, and while preparing, Taylor and Dave got into it, with Taylor saying he was gonna quit following the show. With smoldering tensions, the band completely crushed the show, reinvigorating Foo Fighters in the process. They would go back to Virginia and re-record One by One in only 7 days. The fire was once again burning in their bellies. At Coachella, they opened with All My Life to a hype, thrashing crowd. Dave wrote it to start shows and set a tone of wild, Animal Aggression. The song starts sparse, with only Dave singing about a lifelong search over a persistent drop D riff, before exploding like a powder keg after the first verse. The dueling guitars are abrasive. On the bridge, they switch up between sharp harmonics and wailing blast power chords. The drums are a thudding, primal stomp, and it builds to a climax. Done, done, and I'm on to the next one. Done, I'm done, and I'm on to the next one. With Dave shredding his larynx, only for the band to kick into a vicious, driving rhythm, heavier than American steel and primed for arenas. You don't get a reputation as a killer live band without being able to start the show and immediately deliver the rock and roll goods. All My Life is a chugging, near lethal shot of adrenaline. At number 2, we have The Pretender from Echoes, Silence, Patience, and Grace. It really wouldn't be a new Foo Fighters album without the group giving themselves a challenge. And for their 6th album, that meant having the acoustic and electric songs coexisting on one LP, while beefing up the sonic variety. Grohl chose to work once more with Gil Norton, the producer who helped mold The Color and the Shape. It was the first time since that album where Dave had anyone in the studio questioning his ideas, and the pair spent 2 weeks discussing songs and arrangements before the band started rehearsing, spending 4 weeks playing a song a day from noon to midnight to refine each one. The Pretender started with the working title Silver Heart. It was another demo originally left on the sidelines. After a break in sessions, Grohl decided the LP needed another upbeat song and started developing the tune. While other tracks for the record took weeks to tinker with, The Pretender came together in a single day. While Dave tends to prefer audiences to interpret the lyrics, it's hard to ignore the indignant political bent, with Dave calling out duplicitous bureaucrats for the paper tigers they are. The arrangement manages to brilliantly intertwine the Foo Fighters' iconic wall of guitars along with the swelling orchestra that brings a cinematic flair. Despite adding another layer to an impenetrably dense mix, it miraculously manages to let all the instruments breathe. The dynamics are ever shifting. It starts calm, with trembling strings before unleashing a heavy metal melee, blunt jabs of guitar, and distorted caveman beats that get your blood boiling. The band mastered the art of the pin drop second of silence, making the louder moments even more amped up. With full rock and roll fury behind him, Dave makes shouting, "What if I say I'll never surrender?" like a legitimate threat to the status quo. The Pretender is a righteous, dynamic call to arms, so hard-rocking it would have the Riot Squad shaking in their boots. At number 1, we have Everlong from The Color and the Shape. Dave Grohl was at an all-time low during the Christmas season of 1996. He was effectively homeless, crashing in a sleeping bag at a friend's crib in rural Virginia. He was in the middle of a divorce. He didn't have access to his own bank accounts. And Foo Fighters were in flux, with William leaving and Pat with one foot out the door. The one sliver of solace for Dave was his new romance with Louise Post of the band Veruca Salt. With his head swimming with conflicted emotions, he wrote Everlong in 45 minutes on his friend's couch. After writing it, he thought he ripped off the song Schizophrenia from Sonic Youth. So much so that he played Thurston Moore the demo. Moore told him that the song deserves better than just a demo. Everlong is a dissonant, grungy love song with ripping drop D guitars and jittery drums. It features some of Dave's best and most personal lyrics. He asked his new flame, "Breathe out so I can breathe you in." He's eagerly excited for his new love. He wonders, if everything could ever be this real forever, if anything could ever be this good again. He knows he's been hurt in the past, but falling in love means taking a leap of faith. An ascending guitar line and a frantic, cascading drum kit builds the anticipation higher and higher, leading to the catharsis of the final chorus. And it ends shrouded in feedback and uncertainty. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the amazing music video directed by Michel Gondry, with a twisted, deranged take on Evil Dead. The Foo's music video career showcased their wacky side, even if the songs had dark edges. This clip cemented them as MTV trailblazers. Everlong is an intense, ragged, love-drunk rocker that hits like an impassioned gut punch. It shows the band at their emotionally rawest, sensitive but strong, roaring with distortion and full of genuine hope. It's Foo Fighters at their very best. And now, I'll add 2 more songs that almost made the list. The first near miss is Monkey Wrench. It's jubilant power pop with punk attitude, like Cheap Trick by the Way of the Ramones. And after the brief, slight song Doll, it kicks off their best album like the Bomb Squad coming through with a battering ram. Of course, the most memorable time Foo Fighters played Monkey Wrench live was when Dave made an awkward jump, fell off the stage, and broke his leg. It was only 2 songs in, so the crazed professional that he is, Grohl would return to the stage and play a 2.5-hour-long set with an attendant holding his leg. The legend only got stronger from there, as post-surgery, he returned to the tour playing from a Game of Thrones style throne made of electric guitars. It's definitely a near mythic part of Foo Fighters lore, and for that reason alone, Monkey Wrench is well worthy of a shout out. The other to nearly make the list is Rope. Even though Wasting Light was made 15 years into their career, in my opinion, it might be their second greatest album. Welcoming back old buddy Pat Smear and willing to experiment with their signature sound in the cozy confines of Grohl's garage really brought out some of their best. With Smear back, he would often play a baritone guitar to distinguish his tone from the other 2 guitarists, and it turns the wall of guitars into a fortress. Rope utilizes that 3-headed triple guitar attack with corkscrew angular riffage. Sometimes the guitars harmonize on a line, other times there are counter melodies, and other times it's really just blast of glorious noise. Rope is a meaty, rip-roaring delight, with a huge earworm chorus that is meant to live rent-free in your head, and it deserves to be mentioned among their best. Finally, let's talk about what I consider to be the most overrated song by Foo Fighters, and that is Wheels, released on their Greatest Hits compilation. First off, let's note that Dave Grohl was not at all thrilled with having to release a Greatest Hits album while the band was still active. At the time saying, "Personally, I don't think we've written our greatest songs yet, but that door is always open." That statement is a bit ludicrous at face value. The collection is chock full of the best Foo Fighters songs ever released. But I understand. Any creative soul doesn't want to feel like their best days are behind them. It's not like he was wrong either. Wasting Light would be released after the Hits compilation and is one of their strongest efforts. Regardless, the label exercised their claws and basically demanded a Greatest Hits, which required Foo Fighters to add a few spankin' new tracks to entice fans who already owned all the material. Wheels was composed during the Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace tour, and recorded with producer Butch Vig, which would sow the seeds for him working on their next album. So if anything, that was one positive thing about Wheels. The song though, it's pretty pedestrian, and comes off as a half-hearted attempt to cross over to country rock. Some low-energy honky-tonk, with rhythm rambling like a tumbleweed. The lyrics are trite, aiming for some vague patriotism, and Chris Shiflett's backup vocals sound half asleep, as if he was bored during the recording. Overall, the tone is cloying, and it comes off as insincere. Wheels isn't unlistenable, but it is undeniably pretty weak, and placing it on a Greatest Hits album with honest-to-God alternative rock smashes only really highlights the fact that it isn't up to snuff. Wheels still manages some radio play when they have dozens of songs I'd rather hear, so to me, it's overrated. As you're still watching, I wanted to share a deep cut as well. For that, I'm shining a light on Spill, a B-side on the 7-inch of Best of You. It's anyone's guess why Spill didn't make it on the final double album In Your Honor. To my ears, the jam would have been one of the better cuts on the Electric set. Perhaps the band felt it was a little too familiar. Spill almost sounds like a callback to the early days of the Fighters. The arrangement certainly doesn't reinvent the wheel, with a barrage of buzzing, heavy palm muting, and ringing chords alternating the loud, soft dynamics that is the band's bread and butter, with the drums swinging from thrashy hardcore with wild, splashy cymbals to a tighter Bo Diddley beat. The chorus is simple and catchy, memorable after the first listen through. Maybe they just had too much material that this track got left behind on the cutting room floor. It still rages. If you haven't heard Spill in a while, you should definitely check it out. So there you have it. That was undeniably the top 10 best Foo Fighters songs. So, how wrong was I? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's your top 3? Do you think Wheels is one of their best songs? Let me know. And if there's any artists you'd like to see me rank, let me know in the comments below. Hope you stick around, and thank you for watching. While he was, only be heard on, get your blood worthy of a shouty out. I don't know what that was. Shouty out? I don't know what I said. Shouty out. A shouty out.
We're gonna do a
Shouty out. There was a brief smell.
There's a brief smell.
Briefly, there was a smell in the Foo Fighters.
They didn't talk about it. It's in the documentary, though. It's all about the smell.
There's a whole section about the smell. They're like, I didn't know where it was coming from. Was it Dave? Was it Taylor? No one knows.